5 days to go until the COP26 climate summit, and the host city Glasgow is coming under fire, in essence accused of being unfit to host such a major global event. As we've been reporting, the council leader, Susan Aitken, had to endure all manner of criticism when she appeared before the House of Commons Scottish Affairs Committee yesterday. She dismissed the charge that the city is filthy and an embarrassment. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Douglas Ross, was among the MPs asking the questions, and he joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gary.
Do you think Glasgow's struggling with the demands of this big event?
I think the council leader is struggling with the demands of this event, and Susan Aitken showed in her answers yesterday that she's not got a grip of the situation. She's not speaking in terms of reality with the situation that is facing the city.
So the city isn't ready, in your view?
Well, it's not me that's saying this, it's residents, it's the unions, it's the staff who are working in Glasgow City Council that they're not getting the support from the SNP leadership on the council.
Well, the unions made the point earlier that they're using the COP as leverage, and you would expect them potentially to do that.
Well, the unions have been saying for months that Glasgow City Council is not ready, and their leadership have not been listening to them. I know members of the council from all the other political parties have been urging Susan Aitken to take action far earlier.
So you believe the city at this stage is not ready to host the COP?
Well, I believe the city is not as clean and as tidy as it should be, and this has been said for months and months.
But it is ready to host the COP then?
Sorry, Gary, what I was going to say is this doesn't just affect COP and the 30,000 delegates arriving in the next few days. It really affects the people who live in Glasgow day in, day out, and they're not getting the standards that they should expect from the SNP-run Glasgow City Council.
Well, of course, Glasgow is the host city. This is a UN conference with the UK government as the host nation, as it were. What are they doing to help the city?
Well, in terms of the questioning yesterday, Susan Aitken said they had a very positive, constructive relationship with the UK government. But in terms of...
But what specifically is the UK government doing to help the city with this problem that you see?
Well, the UK government have been engaged for months to deal with this, but the road chaos...
Well, I'm asking you for some specifics. What specifically are they doing?
Gary, you're asking me about the issues that are within the remit of the Scottish Government. These are devolved issues, transport links, the...
Mr Ross, you're also an MP at Westminster, so what is the UK Government doing?
Well, the UK Government have been constructively engaging and working with Glasgow City Council. There is going to be a full cost recovery for the City Council.
Can you give me any specifics at all?
Well, the full cost recovery is quite specific, Gary. All the money needed by Glasgow City Council is coming from the UK government to host this conference. But in terms of the rail strikes, let's look at that one. That is an issue for Scottish Government ministers to sort, and they have dithered and delayed, and we're coming up to the final moments, and still we have threats, really big threats, credible threats, that the trains won't be running to get delegates to and from this event.
But that's a separate issue from the Glasgow City issue, isn't it? That's a very separate issue.
Well, no, Gary, it will affect Glasgow City and the whole of Scotland if these rail strikes continue.
So would you put more money on the table for the RMT?
So what I would have done was engaged far earlier. I mean, the Scottish Government have stood back and seen this happen for months. They've not got to grips with the situation. Now, I'm quite clear that these unions are exploiting COP26 to their advantage, and I think that's absolutely wrong. But fundamentally, the Scottish Government have been found wanting. They've stood on the sidelines, done nothing about this to the last minute, and that's why there is the potential for absolute chaos, because the SNP Scottish Government and the SNP-run Glasgow City Council haven't dealt with these issues soon enough.
Well, how would you resolve that chaos? Would you put more money on the table?
No, you would deal with this far sooner. You wouldn't leave it to the last minute.
Well, Mr Ross, with respect, you know, the old adage is we are where we are. What would you do? What would you do now? Because you're telling us this is all going to be a big disaster. Here we are, a week to go. What can the Scottish Government do? What can Glasgow City Council do right this minute? What would you suggest?
Well, Gary, would you have sat back for months and done nothing about it? Or if you were the Transport Minister, would you have been engaging months ago to try and resolve this? I mean, just last night...
It's Tuesday, the 26th of October. What would you do today, Mr Ross?
And on Monday, the 25th of October, late last night, Graham Day tweeted out a statement to say that he was unhappy that the unions hadn't done more. Well, the unions and others are unhappy that the SNP government have done nothing for weeks and months to try and solve this problem, rather than leaving it to just days before the COP conference starting.
What would you do today?
Well,
Would you put more money on the table?
I would get them round the table again to say, stop exploiting this, get the unions to ensure that they accept the offer and get back to work to make sure that we don't have the chaos that is threatening this conference, but not just the conference, people getting to and from work, Glaswegians getting around their city. Everyone is going to suffer as a result of this.
Well, with respect, Graham Day was on the programme earlier. He's also urging the unions to accept the offer.
But where has he been for the last few months, Gary?
But what would be different in terms of your urging of
Gary,
accepting the offer compared to him urging to accept the offer? The unions say they want more money on the table. Would you put more money on the table?
But Gary, you don't leave it to the last minute. They have got all the power now because the SNP have left this to the very last minute. You solve this in the summer. You get round the table far earlier. You don't leave it until just days before the conference begins.
On the issue of the environment, some people might question your environmental credentials given the vote that there was on the Environment Bill at Westminster, where an amendment was rejected in the Commons to place a legal duty on water companies in England to end sewage population. Did you vote against that amendment?
Gary, you do understand that that environmental bill, which passed the committee stage, actually strengthened the powers to stop sewage being let out into the waterways. Now, the specific amendment you're asking about, and this has got a lot of social media traction and a lot of MPs have faced an awful lot of abuse for it, would have cost between £150 billion and £500 billion to implement. So it was uncosted. And secondly, it would have seen more sewage discharged into public streets if there was flooding. So
but just answer my question. Did you vote against the amendment?
No, Gary, this is really important because you've clearly picked something up on social media, as a number of people have. So the amendment was an uncosted plan, anywhere between £150 billion and £500 billion to implement. And if it was introduced, it would have seen raw sewage not released at times of peak demand into the sea, but into communities, into people's driveways and homes, and that's something I can't vote for.
Well, the reason you mentioned social media is because the UK government's launched a defensive social media campaign because of the anger that people have been expressing over this issue. Just to be clear, you did vote against this amendment, didn't you? Which would have placed a legal duty on water companies to end sewage population, to end sewage being put into rivers in England, and it would apparently have demonstrated a reduction in the harm caused by discharge of untreated sewage, and you voted against that.
But it wouldn't have done that, Gary. You've picked up, as many other people have on social media, but you've not looked into the details. It would have cost more than the entire bill for the COVID pandemic spent by the United Kingdom government, and it would have been more likely that people's homes would have been flooded by raw sewage rather than, at times of peak demand, this release.
So when it comes to environmental credentials, the bottom line is money. Is that the case?
You keep on interrupting. What you're not paying any attention to is the fact that the environmental bill, as passed, had tougher restrictions on sewage being discharged. The actual bill strengthens the case, and we want to do more. And crucially, and this is the important point, every single member on all sides of the House said that we had to do more to deal with this issue. But the answer is not to accept the very first offer that is going to cost hundreds of billions of pounds and threatens raw sewage going into people's homes.
Boris Johnson says it's touch and go whether a global Green Deal can be sealed at COP26. The Prime Minister is usually famed for being optimistic. Are you concerned that Glasgow might be synonymous with a failure to get a deal?
Well, it's incumbent on everyone who attends COP26 to make it a success. Now, I'm not going to write it off before it even begins. I want to ensure that it is a success and we get a lasting legacy. And that's also what we heard as a Scottish Affairs Select Committee from various organisations and, crucially, young people yesterday. They were so adamant that we have to get a successful COP26.
But Boris Johnson says, I'm very worried because it might go wrong and we might not get the agreement we need. How concerned are you?
Well, I'm concerned, but I'm not going to write it off before the event even begins.
So why is the Prime Minister saying this then?
Well, the Prime Minister is right to look at all the situations in front of him. He and the COP President-designate have a big job ahead of them, but we also have a great opportunity and we can't let that go.
Douglas Ross, thank you very much for joining us this morning. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives there.